72 teams to go on my road to predict all 131 teams this college football offseason. And we're moving on to the Washington State Cougars. And this, a lot of people, and me including, think, don't mind the finger, I hurt myself, don't worry about it. But when you look at this Washington State team, a lot of people think this can be a sleeper team in the Pac-12, and for good reason as well. There's a lot of talent on this team. They have one of the better transfer quarterbacks coming in as well, as long with a new cut. There's a whole lot of things that are working in Washington State's favor. Can this be the surprise team in the Pac-12 conference in 2022? Or is Washington State gonna underachieve and just maybe be a solid bowl team instead? What's up, Tailgaters? My name is Tailgate Nate, and welcome to my channel. I'm predicting all 131 teams this college football offseason. Guys, that means I'm doing your favorite teams. So go ahead and hit the subscribe button, ring the bell, so you know when that video gets uploaded. And for fans of the Washington State Cougars out there, you guys are probably going to know this team a lot better than I do. So if you feel like I missed something, you want to add something, maybe I get something wrong, because that happens sometimes, leave it in the comment section down below, and I'll be happy to see what you guys have to say. So let's talk about Washington State, shall we, in 2022. This is my 5th ranked team in the Pac-12 coming into the 2022 season, and last year was a pretty solid year for Washington State. They were 7-6 overall. We're 6-3 in conference play. Real good stuff from Washington State a season ago. However, they didn't expect to get rid of their coach, Nick Rolovich, who refused to get vaccinated for COVID, so they had to let him go. And we'll look at who their head coach here is in a second. Or by Washington State standards, he had to be vaccinated. So because he wasn't, they let him go. Some stats from this Cougar team a season ago: 379 yards with around 28 points per game a season ago on the offensive end. And on the defensive end, well, kind of much the same story. 379 yards allowed with 24 points per game allowed. So they're definitely scoring more than they are allowing, which is good, but probably want to increase that offensive production, and they might be able to do it this year. But first, we got to look at some talent that is coming back. So Jake Dickert's going to be now that full-time head coach for the Washington State Cougars, and he's got quite a bit of talent leaving this team. So you got a couple quarterbacks that are leaving this team. Of course, Jarrett Guarantano was a Tennessee transfer that never really found it. Only had 304 yards, a touchdown, and 3 picks. But you are losing your starting quarterback, Jaden DeLaura, as well. He's transferred over to Arizona. He had 2,798 yards, 23 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions, as well as 3 rushing touchdowns a season ago. And speaking of rushing touchdowns, you lose one of the better running backs, in my opinion, one of the better, or I guess more underrated running backs in the nation, in Max Borghi. That's 880 yards with 12 touchdowns a season ago. You'll lose his threat. For most of his career was a pretty solid threat out of the backfield as well. 156 yards out of the backfield receiving a season ago. You also lose Deion McIntosh, who was the second leading rusher on this team. 532 yards and 3 touchdowns. You lose him as well. Calvin Johnson, not Calvin Johnson. Man, can you imagine? But no, Calvin Jackson and then Travell Harris. 2 guys that are leaving. That were the 2 leading receivers a season ago. So Jackson, 987 yards and 7 touchdowns. And Harris, 814 yards and 9 touchdowns. So you lose that production. On the defensive end, Willie Taylor, Jahad Woods, who was the leading tackler, had 109 tackles last year, and an interception as well, is gone. Justice Rogers, the second leading tackler, is no longer on the team. He had 2 picks last year. And then in the defensive back group, Jalen Watson, Daniel Isom, and George Hicks. Some pretty talented players leaving that backfield. So definitely not without their losses on the talent front for Washington State. But when you look at this team overall, Cameron Ward, that's a name that you probably don't know, but you're going to know by the end of the season. I'm sure Washington State fans know who he is, but in case you don't know who Cameron Ward is and you're not a Cougar fan watching this video, he's a transfer from Incarnate Word. That was the highest touted transfer prospect from the FCS level. One of the best quarterbacks in the FCS a season ago. He's going to come into the FBS now in this Washington State program, and I think they can absolutely light things up with Cameron Ward at the helm. He's going to be that starter, but they have a freshman behind him that if Cameron Ward gets hurt, which again, I don't predict injuries because you can't, they have a freshman named Emmett Brown behind him that figures to be, if Cameron Ward ends up in the NFL next season, that starter for Washington State moving forward. But it's Cameron Ward's time to shine in 2022. Former Wisconsin transfer Nakia Watson is probably going to end up being that feature back this year. 114 yards last season. Again, most of the load was Borghi and McIntosh, but Nakia Watson's there, and there's a lot of freshmen, sophomores behind Nakia Watson in that running back room. In the wide receiver room, you still get some good amount of talent back. Deshaun Stribling is back, had 471 yards, 5 touchdowns a season ago. Also, Lincoln Victor. And again, another name that you may never have heard of. I'm sure Washington State fans know him. Robert Farrell. He was a wide receiver with Cameron Ward at Incarnate Word. So some chemistry things going to work out there for him. And then Andre Dollar, the tight end, is a transfer coming in for this team as well. When you look at the defensive end, Ron Stone, Brennan Jackson, Nusi Milani, that's a transfer coming in. Dayan Henley, Trevion Brown, Armani Marsh had 3 interceptions, which led the team a season ago. Derek Langford had 2 interceptions a season ago. And then Jordan Lee also coming back for this team. Jordan Lee is a transfer. They have 3 transfers coming back, or they have 3 transfers coming in, I should say, in that defensive back position. The other 2 I'm looking now are Sam Lockett and Cam Lampkin, figure to be starting roles there for them as well. So there's still a lot of talent on this Washington State team, and I think a lot of the sleeper aspect of this Washington State team, while everyone is saying, they're such a sleeper, is going to be a lot reliant on Cam Ward. And if Cameron Ward can be that guy and put up spectacular, possibly even really good numbers, Washington State's going to be a team to watch out for. But let's look at the schedule for this Cougars team. So you got, in non-conference play, you have Idaho, you have Colorado State, but the one that jumps out to you is that road game against Wisconsin. Absolutely is the one that jumps out to you there. Wisconsin definitely is the odds-on, at least in Vegas, the favorite to win that division in the Big Ten West, which is wide open this year. But when you look ahead in conference play for Washington State, they got Oregon at home, Cal at home, other home games being Utah, Arizona State, and Washington. And then you got to go on the road to play USC, Oregon State, Stanford, and Arizona. So, doing a little bit more of a deep dive in the schedule. Again, the interesting non-conference game is Wisconsin. Idaho, Colorado State, probably figure to be wins there, but Wisconsin, that's an interesting one. It's a very, very interesting game. So, when you go on the road to play in Camp Randall, again, never an easy thing. And this Washington State defense was pretty solid last year. They're going to go up against one of the better defenses a season ago. So Cam Ward and company going to be tested right out of the gate. I think it'll be a good test for Washington State. It'll kind of see what Wisconsin's made up of as well, because there are still playmakers on this Washington State defense, and Graham Mertz is a quarterback that, for a long time has had to improve his play. When you look in conference play, this is definitely a tough conference schedule for Washington State. I mean, the home game against Oregon, a lot of people picking that upset there over the Oregon, or for Washington State over the Oregon Ducks at home. And then when you look elsewhere, I mean, again, just some tough games. I mean, you got to go on the road to play USC. You got Utah coming in to your building. Now, what I will say is that's a Friday night game, and I talked a lot about this last year, but I don't think I've mentioned it this year. In college football, you oftentimes see teams struggle, especially highly ranked teams, going on the road to play those weekday games, right? So that could be a game where Washington State may have more of an advantage than we might think. And then, of course, the Apple Cup against Washington. Washington bringing in Kalen DeBoer, so another new head coach looking to lay a solid foundation for that Husky program. Otherwise, when you look elsewhere, some tough road games. I mean, USC, that's going to be a revamped team at Oregon State. That is also going to be quite the team there with Oregon State. Possibly another Pac-12 sleeper with the Oregon State Beavers. But back to USC, I mean, they're just going to be revamped with Lincoln Riley and Caleb Williams and all the talent that they have there on the offensive end. That's going to be a really good offensive football team. Defense has some question marks, yes, but a really good offensive football team, no doubt. This Washington State defense will be tested as they go on the road. And some other road games, Stanford, again, another possible sleeper in the Pac-12. And then on the road to Arizona, that team is only improving. So I think watch out for the Wildcats. They might be able to pull off a win or two that they're not really supposed to have. I don't do game-by-game predictions. I do a more percentage-based outlook, tell me predict the team's record. So if the game's in red, I just don't think you're winning the game. If the game's in orange, I still don't think you're going to win, but it is college football, and upsets can happen. Yellow are your 50-50 or high upset potential games. Games in yellow-green are games that you should win, but you got to watch out for teams on the other side of the ball, and games in green are games that I have you winning. So again, Idaho, Colorado State should be wins for this Washington State team. When you go on the road to play Wisconsin, it's a tough environment to play in. That still projects to be one of the best defenses in the Big Ten, if not in the entire nation. And while Wisconsin's got a lot of question marks on offense, specifically in the passing game, their running game is going to be fine with Braylon Allen. I think we know this. There's an interesting storyline with this game as well that I haven't mentioned yet. Nakia Watson, of course, is a former Wisconsin transfer, so going to play the team that he played on a couple seasons ago. Could have some motivation there, but I think this is going to be a nice early test for Washington State. I think odds are they may drop this game. Wouldn't surprise me at all to see them keep it close, possibly even win it, but I think likely they end up dropping that game, but it's a good test moving forward. When you look at some other games in orange on this schedule, at USC, at home against Utah, I think those are just going to be two tough games to win. That very well could be your Pac-12 championship game right there with USC and Utah. So overall, when you look at those games in orange, I could see Washington State winning maybe one of them, but I think it's going to be tough to win any one of them. So maybe they win one of them, but again, I think odds are that they may drop all three of those. But I do have 5 games in the green color. So Cal, Arizona State, and Arizona. I think they should be able to pull out those wins. So you just got to look for one more win on the schedule, and there are a ton of places where you could look for that. I mean, at home against Oregon, trap game for Oregon. I know it's early in the season. It's still September, but college football chaos waits for no one. So we could see chaos right out of the gate in September, right first game in conference play. Washington State absolutely has the talent to pull off that upset, especially if Cam Ward is what a lot of people say he is. There are a couple tough road games on there. I mean, on the road against Oregon State, on the road against Stanford. Chances of you winning one of those games, I think if you're going to win one of those games, probably beat Stanford more than Oregon State. But again, some pretty interesting road games there. And then the Apple Cup at home against Washington. Again, that's a team that's still trying to find itself from the disappointment last year. This is a Washington State team that is a sleeper in the Pac-12. Agreed. And I could see them having as high as a 9-3 type season. I think it may start with them going into Camp Randall and pulling off a shocker. I think Cameron Ward would need to have a big day. Nakia Watson probably goes off against his former team. But if that doesn't happen, maybe they start 3-1 with a win against Oregon. Maybe they start 4-2, and it's really easy. But pretty simple to find 2 wins down the stretch. I mean, look at the 2 games highlighted in green. But this is the Washington State team that I think is going 7-5 this year. I was borderline them 7-5, 8-4, because I do think they'll win one of those 2 road games, or maybe they lose both and they win that game against Oregon and they win the Apple Cup. But those 3 games in orange, probably drop those. This team is a sleeper in the Pac-12, and they're going to win a game that they, quote, are not supposed to. But this is the team that you got to watch out for Washington State. I think Cam Ward's going to be really good. I think Nakia Watson can have a big year. Good wide receiver group. Pretty solid defensive unit there as well. So we'll see how Jake Dickert does in his first full season as the head coach of the Washington State Cougars. I got him at 7-5 and a possible Pac-12 sleeper. So that's my prediction on the Cougars for Washington State. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe, everything like that. And remember to play hard but tailgate harder. I'll see all you guys in the next video. Goodbye.